All right. Good morning, everybody. How is everyone? Good. It's awake. It's not too early. So thanks for coming out today. We have Katie Walls from FOX4 News. She's a meteorologist, and the flyer had a little bit about her bio. I didn't know you were in. Was it a circus?
It's Florida State Flying High
It's
Circus.
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So, so there's a lot that we don't know about Katie yet, but she's going to share with us some wonderful information about the hurricane season, as we know that's fastly approaching. So she's here to give us some good news, hopefully. So Katie Walls, everybody.
Thanks, Jesse. It is what it is, right? We can't just be ostriches with our heads in the sand. So my name is Katie. I am a meteorologist. My undergraduate degree is from Florida State, and while I was in calculus classes and all of the things, lots of thermodynamics and fun classes, but to get out all that stress, yes, I was in the Florida State Flying High Circus. So it's a very good way to get out energy, hang upside down for a little bit, and then you go back to class. So from Florida State, I went to Penn State. That's where my master's degree is from. Both are in meteorology. First job was in Southern Illinois. Then I was at Wink for 3 years. Then I was in Atlanta for 6 years, and Charlotte for 2. And then got the call, hey, we have openings for you and your husband back down here. And I was like, yup, because we love it down here. That's why we're here, right? It's paradise. But there's a price to paradise, unfortunately. Um, I feel we've gone through the worst of it with Ian. That is absolutely a worst case scenario for sure. We were in the top threshold of every single model when it comes to you'll see me show most reasonable forecast, and then I'll also show the worst case scenario, and it was that upper threshold. So we know it can happen. We just have to recognize that the potential is there. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. We'll review the forecast. We'll review what we're expecting, that kind of thing. All right. I like to say that Southwest Florida, we have 2 seasons. We have dry season, which we're in right now, starting to transition a little bit. We're starting to see a better chance for rain every day this week. So that's good because God knows we need it. All of us are now in severe to extreme drought. So it's the worst drought that we have seen in about 2 years. That was the last time that Lee County had extreme in it. Wet season traditionally begins, climatologically speaking, based upon the past 30 years of data, around mid-May and ends around mid-October. So, as a matter of fact, funnily enough, last year, Milton, the strong front that came in behind Milton, that was one of the final catalysts to kick us into dry season. Normally it takes 3 different catalysts or 3 different systems. Milton actually helped kick us into dry last year. Then, of course, we have hurricane season. So that starts June 1st. And then for us, we rock and roll August, September, and October. So especially September. We peak around September 10th. During September 10th, I typically have anywhere from 3 to 7 different name systems in the different basins. We cover the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf. So that's when we're super active. So those are the months I don't take vacation. All right, this is the current forecast. Right now, we are in what we call end zone neutral. We're not in an El Nino. We're not in a La Nina. We are right down the middle. Okay, has its pros and cons. Last year, we were in La Nina, right? We transitioned into La Nina, and that was anytime you're in a La Nina, that's when you rock and roll. Look at 2020. 2020 was similar to last year when it comes to just end zone neutral over to La Nina. In 2020, there were 30 named storms, the most ever recorded. Last year, we had 18 named storms, but we were hit by technically 3 of them. We had Debbie, and then we had, of course, Helene and Milton. All of those storms stayed away from us. There were no direct hits in Southwest Florida. They were all indirect hits. Helene made landfall in the Big Bend. Milton made landfall in Siesta Key. Debbie stayed 130 miles offshore as a tropical storm, and we still had 8 inches of flooding. Who remembers the flooding down at Chiquita and Surfside and Trafalgar? Remember all that? That's when I saved that awful fish that was crossing the road. I didn't know it. I saw a fish crossing the road. Not joking. I was coming home. It was like 1 a.m, and I see this thing flopping across. I'm like, oh my God, I got to stop my car. And I was like, I got you, buddy. And I put him in a box in the back of my car, and I ran him to like this lake. And then I showed Brian, and he's like, that was an armored catfish. That's an invasive species. I was like, I was trying to do a good deed here, but I tried, okay? There was a fish crossing the road. So our forecast, unfortunately, is for another active season. Somewhat similar to last year. The average based upon the past 30 years of data, you'll see that right there. So this is your 30-year average. Colorado State University forecast, they're the best. We use NOAA, we use Colorado State. You'll see a lot of other people try to put out their forecasts. No one can touch those. No one can touch those experts. There's a reason why we don't show it. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, Bob came out with his forecast. I'm like, well, I can too. You know, let's let the people with multiple PhDs in tropical forecasting make those predictions. So even though, sure, I have degrees too, it doesn't mean that I know as much as they do, right? So that's why we always look to the experts. And of course, it's something I like to talk about a lot just because it's becoming more of a problem in my world. But the forecast does call for more active season than average. And unfortunately, because of just how warm the Gulf is, we're probably going to be active again. It's unfortunately just the nature of how things are happening. Plus, Atlantic temperatures are still very much above average. Not quite as hot as this time last year. This time last year, the Atlantic was the warmest it has ever been this early in the season. So at least it's not quite that warm, but we are still definitely seeing the ocean absorb a lot of energy right now. These were the three storms that were retired last year: Beryl, Helene, and Milton. We got hit with 2 out of the 3. And then I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but every 6 years, so we have 6 lists of names and they rotate every 6 years. So we'll see last year's list again in 2030, and then those are the new names that you'll see in 2030. So Beryl will be replaced with Brianna, Helene with Holly, Milton with Miguel. And then these are our names for this year. We're going to start things off with Andrea, and we have Barry, Chantal, Dexter. Dexter's a new name. Do you all remember Dorian? Dorian was 2019. Dorian was a monster. Sat over the Bahamas for several days as a Cat 5. We thought it would basically create so much upwelling for itself that it would kill itself out. No, the water's so shallow there that it just kept fueling itself as it parked over Abaco. It was catastrophic for the Bahamas. So this year, that's the only new name that you'll notice. Otherwise, you've seen this list before back in 2019. Aaron, Fernan, Gabriel, Umberto. If you don't like the list of names, you can talk to the World Meteorological Organization. That is made up of, I think, 37 different countries. They get together and they come up with a fun list. So that's why you see a really fun variety of names and spellings and ways that I wouldn't spell things. A couple of cool changes coming in from the National Hurricane this season. Just had a meeting with them a couple of weeks ago. You see us show the potential tropical cyclone maps, right? So potential tropical cyclones, those cones, are issued in anticipation of a very high likelihood that we will have at least a tropical storm develop. What's great this year, we'll start to see those potential tropical cyclone cones issued up to 72 hours ahead of potential development. So last year it was 2-day heads up. Now it's up to 3. That's fantastic. That's another day that we can be like, okay, I don't like how this is looking, especially if it's something that's, this, I can't remember which one this was. This looks more Debbie-ish. Yeah, probably. Yeah, this was the PTC issued for Debbie last year. So at least, we being here, you're like, okay, tropical storm, we can handle tropical storm. But if you start seeing those numbers going up, right? Like on a PTC map, if you see a 3, 4, or 5 heading our direction, then you're like, okay, let's go ahead and start organizing. Let's be prepared to pivot, especially if you have any sort of medical needs. You have to think in advance. So that's what's great now. You'll start seeing these cones issued farther in advance. So I'm really, really excited about that. It also prevents other people from making their own cones. That happened last year. You might remember Sarah. There's a certain other company out there that I don't want to mention. I guarantee I'm going to at some point on accident. and they created their own cone, and they had it making landfall again in Central Florida. The National Hurricane Center said in all their stuff, no, it's going to die out over the Yucatan. It died out over the Yucatan. But first there was a fake cone. I call it a fake cone because I mean, if it's not issued by the National Hurricane Center, as far as I'm concerned, it's fake. And there it was floating out there. And I don't know how many meetings I had to have to help let Scripps know and let Fox know and all my managers know across the state. This is why it's not going to happen. And sure enough, when they saw it fizzle, and I'm like, see that little X dissipated at 11 a.m.? That's why. So just make sure the cones that you see, what I show on TV, directly from the National Hurricane Center, physically ingested straight in. You can also go to nhc.gov. That way you know the exact cone that's being issued. It's a problem. Also, another good change that's coming up this year, the tropical storm, hurricane, storm surge watches will be issued. It used to be 48 hours in advance, and now we have an extra 12 hours. So again, so in theory, we could start getting hurricane watches here 2.5 days before the thing even forms, or before we have that impact, which would be great. That much extra time. Get your shutters up, right? If you need to move, you go ahead and go inland. You move the 10 miles inland or whatever you have to do to make sure you're not in storm surge territory. Of course, for us, the biggest concern is how long do you want to be without power, right? We might not flood, but we know what we went through with Ian with being without power for, I know my house was about 9 days. I know there were a lot of people that were in far worse situations. So it's also a matter of how comfortable you are. If you just want to go away and ignore it, that'd be nice. All right. So the cone is simply where the center is going. Simply where the center is going. The cone continues to shrink because our track forecasts are getting that much better. That's a good thing. But again, that's where the center is going. Impacts can extend hundreds of miles from the storm center. So I'll show you a graphic here in just a minute. Tropical Storm Debbie was 130 miles offshore, and we still had 8 inches of rain, and Sandoval still got flooded with 1 to 2 feet of storm surge. And it was that far away. So that's why I always say don't focus on where that cone is going. Obviously, be aware of it, but just know too, even with Hurricane Milton, when it was in the Gulf, and it was hours and hours and hours before it made landfall, we were dealing with a tornado outbreak, from all those outer rain bands. So it was still hundreds of miles offshore, and we were already seeing those very, very dangerous storms. That was, for us, I think, probably the worst part here of the storm. And then, of course, the surge came that night. This is your Safford-Simpson scale. It's what we use to measure storm intensity. It's all based upon winds, not based upon millibars, not based upon pressure. Of course, the lower the pressure, that tends to mean stronger winds, but that's how it is for now. Category 3 and higher, that is officially major. So if I start calling for a major hurricane, you have to expect you're going to be out of, that's fun, it went by itself. You have to expect to be out of power, for several days, at least. Just a couple of easy things that we can do now. We have our evacuation plans. And obviously you all are here because you want to be prepared. You're smart. You're going to be watching everything. So you'll have that 2 to 3 days heads up. Do I want to go? Do I not want to go? All right, I'm going to go ahead and go. I want to go ahead of traffic. I know last year for Milton, my uncle is up in Punta Gorda. He's 90. And anxiety started to hit him real bad. I was like, Bill, you got to go now, man. I was like, otherwise you're going to be in gridlock traffic and with even worse anxiety, right? With a storm bearing down on you. So it's like if you are even thinking, okay, I want to go, then go. We have our disaster supply kits, of course, food, water, batteries, charger, everything. Just be prepared to be without power for a minimum of 5 days. At this point, my to-go kit, I have all my MREs, a whole bunch of waters, and it's good for 7 to 10 days. Obviously, if you're on a generator, that's a whole different ball game because that's going to be a lot of gas to fuel those generators. We all remember what happened after Ian. Always good idea. I'm sure a lot of us got dropped from insurance. I know I got dropped from my insurance. So I'm reviewing my policies right now, just making sure everything is buttoned up for sure. Can't hurt. Also, now's a really good time to go through your house and take pictures or take a video of all of your belongings. God forbid You get a hole in your roof, you have water intrusion. You want to make sure that you're like, no, I assure you that was a $3,000 dresser, and not, and then they only want to give you back 150 bucks, right? So little things like that, just making sure you're buttoned up. Because of course, if you're not, then that's when you need it. All right, that was a picture I took from Matt Lachey. Still there, hasn't moved. It's obviously quite precarious. So storm surge accounts for most of the fatalities. It's 50%, unfortunately. It was exactly 50% in Ian. In Lee County, there were 72 people who lost their lives, and 36 of those were directly attributed to drowning and storm surge. Heavy rainfall, inland flooding obviously is also a concern. Like I said, with Debbie, we saw it. You have high winds. That's what did the roof damage here. Tornadoes like we saw in Milton, those were some big boys too. And we always say hide from wind, run from water. You cannot beat water. Water will win, right? Cars aren't boats. People still think they are, but they're not. So, if you're going to leave, you want to do it before there's any sort of water threat. Know your zone. These zones are based upon your susceptibility to storm surge, your susceptibility to flooding. It has nothing to do with FEMA maps. So get that out of your head, right? If you're like, I'm good. No, you're not. We are zone A. We are zone A. We are red. So anywhere in red, that will be the first zone to be called by the county in the event of evacuations. So again, that's why you have to know your own susceptibility. If you flooded in Ian, if you flooded in Milton, if you flooded in Helene, kind of thing, knowing your personal property or your loved one's property, be like, hey, it's time to bounce. So here in Lee County, we go A through E. Okay, and of course we have a fun little thing on storm surge. So storm surge is simply just strong winds forcing that giant wall of water on shore. In Ian, it was about a 15-foot wall of water in Fort Myers Beach. Whee! All right. And this is actually something I made. It's called the front right quadrant. We always talk about the front right-hand part of the storm, the front right quadrant. Can you see it okay? So that's Ian. And then I juxtaposed right here, I circled where we had the worst of that storm surge. Look at that. Perfect. St. James City, Sanibel, Fort Myers Beach down to Naples. Naples had 6 to 9 feet of surge, as well as Marco Island. But it's all about the path of the storm and your relationship to it. The problem with us where we are in Southwest Florida, any storm that's paralleling the coast or close to us, we're going to get it because we're going to end up on the front right quadrant in some way, just because of the orientation of our land. So we just have to be really aware of that, just like we saw last year. Ian, again, was a worst case scenario. This is from Debbie. So again, it was 130 miles offshore, but still flooded coastal roadways with about 2 feet of surge. And again, here we had the 8 to 10 inches of rainfall. These are just a couple of different storm surges. That over there is the picture of what Sandoval Causeway looked like. It just reopened, so it's, for us, we're in long-term recovery mode. There are still a lot of places like Mount Lachey, that still have not recovered. So for us, when we get hit with a major, it's going to be a long-term recovery process. So with Hurricane Ian, it produced 7.25 feet in downtown Fort Myers. That particular gauge goes back to 1965. So that's the highest the water has ever gotten in downtown Fort Myers. So the water came up the Caloosahatchee River. And then that was the height on top of high tide, how extra high the water rose. That came in first place for the worst flooding ever. Then last year we had places 2 and 3. Milton came in second, Helene came in third, going back to 1965. So we've had the 3 highest storm surges in the course of 3 years here in decades. So I think we have to be really cognizant of that. Like, again, it happened within 2 weeks of each other again. And that was the biggest thing. I think so many people were like, well, there's no way it can happen again. No, it can. And none of us wanted it to happen. God knows we were all exhausted. We just always have to be ready to go. I mentioned cars aren't boats. It only takes 1 foot of water to move most cars. I enjoyed sitting down there at the corner and I just watched people kept trying. I just watched them try. There was a Prius that passed me. Okay, good luck. He did not make it. He did not make it. Um, I like to talk about following like actual meteorologists. There are a lot of people on the internet. I call them meteorologists. And it's great. They're passionate about the weather. They love the weather. That's wonderful. But sometimes you really need people who have gone to school for it. Maybe they have multiple degrees in it. At least somebody, National Hurricane Center, National Weather Service, your local Mets, all local meteorologists here all have at least 1 degree in meteorology. Because unfortunately there are a couple of, I mean, and these people that I'm thinking of have, hundreds of thousands of followers. Oh, this is the only guy I like. Here's the problem though. When you're just ripping model data 10 days in advance and you're posting it, how is that helpful? Right? There's a lot of model data you cannot use beyond 7 days. Things like that. So never ever share, we'll talk about it, but never share something that's more than 7 days out. Chances are that kind of dynamical model doesn't have the resolution. It actually starts to regurgitate itself. So for example, like the GFS 10 days out always gives me like 14 hurricanes. I would never ever post it, but I see it posted all the time because clicks. Clicks mean money for a lot of these people. For me, I hate my social media. I just post stuff that I have to. So there you go. I'm not about to do anything for clicks. If you want to check it out, great. But please just make sure that who you are following, National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center, local government officials, of course, Lee County, and your local broadcast Mets. Whether it's from Gulf Coast, Wink, Fox, you can ensure that it is all real data and we're not going to lead you the wrong way. And if you don't like what you see, let's say you do look at one of those other websites, you're like, that seems crazy. And then you can come over to ours, follow a bunch. Go, be like, oh, Matt Devitt said the same thing as Katie Walls. Weird. It's like they talk on the phone. Because we do. We text each other. If they're like last year during Milton, there were things he's like, "What gauge are you using for blah blah blah?" For St. James City, I was like, "Oh, I'm using the new Hohonu gauges." Lee County has installed, fun fact, an extra 11 storm tidal gauges across Lee County. So I'm now able to watch it. They started installing them during Helene, like right after, well, it was up to Helene, obviously then Helene hit, and then shortly thereafter Milton. But during Hurricane Milton, I was able to use a lot of those new gauges and I was able to see the water coming up in St. James City. There's a new sensor, a land sensor down on First Street in downtown Fort Myers. I was able to tell our reporters to not take certain roads because I knew they were going to be flooded. So cool. So all of that's like public information. All things that I'll be posting on my webpage or my Facebook or whatever. That way then you can also watch the water come up in certain areas. But Lee County has definitely taken some big strides. So 11 new gauges have been installed, and they're looking to install another 8 to 10. So it's really, really great stuff. This is an example of what not to share. It's just a naked cone, a naked horrifying cone, showing that dreaded M and then us in the middle. And honestly, I think this is a really, really old Ian graphic, but I saw it circulated again last year. You see how somebody has screen grabbed it, cropped out the bottom. You don't know the date, you don't know the time, you don't know the name of it. It's just terrifying. And that's the kind of thing that will spread like wildfire. So things like that, you're like, hold on, hold on. All you have to do, nhc.noaa.gov, you hit it and you're like, and that doesn't exist, right? So it's that kind of thing of just being aware of what circulates, especially on the socials. When a storm threatens, we know to be ready to rock and roll. I get a question a lot. Things that you can do now. We're talking about always having your go bag ready to go. Know what to do with your pets. You're going to take your pets, you're going to put them in a shelter farther inland, whatever you have to do. Help your neighbors if you can, or if you know that you might need help putting up shutters, you have a company already on standby. You let them know, hey, as soon as that watch is issued, as soon as a hurricane watch is issued, that is when you put up the shutters. That is a general rule of thumb. When a watch is issued, hurricane watch, go ahead and put up your shutters. because chances are we'll go into a warning at some point. Once there's a warning issue, that means that your time is running out and it's imminent. Yep, there we go. Pretty shutters. Sorry, it's white. So we have our emergency kits ready to go at that point. Obviously, gas. As soon as we go into the cone, fill up your gas tanks because you know it's going to go downhill rapidly with gas stations. But honestly, during this time of year, I don't travel without under a half a tank of gas. That's just kind of in my brain. I just always have at least a half a tank, at least enough that I know that it would be able to get my loved ones out. I'm stuck here with you guys, so. But my kiddos, I'll get them out. And again, if you need more time, if you have any sort of uh, reason, if you cannot be without power for more than a couple of days, then get moving earlier, sooner rather than later. And I always have to show this just because of how many. I have a cat. His name's Van Gogh. He lost his ear in Hurricane Irma. The reason why, he was in Marco Island, either he escaped or he got left. I think he got left. And then by the time they found him, he was not in a good situation. They had to amputate his ear. And then he ended up in Naples Humane Society, enter me, right? So now I have this 16-year-old one-eared cat. He's great, but if you ever see him around, just give me a call. He likes to escape. You would think after that adventure, he would not want to go outside. No, he loves being outside. But I always like to remind people, please don't leave your pets. Don't forget about them. Even after Ian, the stories that the Lee County folks were telling me, cats in rafters. Cats will climb. If they can get to rafters to survive, they will. And they said they had so many cats up in the rafters that they were trying to get down. Things like that. It's just like gut-wrenching. I do want to point out, after Irma, well, during Irma is when they made all Lee County shelters completely pet friendly. So worst case scenario, you need to get to a shelter, take your pets with you, obviously in cages, leashes, all the things. But anything domesticated, they said they had like parrot, or is it a couple turtles? There were a couple turtles, of course, cats and dogs, rabbits. I think they said there was a snake. Glad your snake's okay. But so there we go. So all Lee County shelters, because that's always a big reason. It goes both ways. Why people don't leave or why they leave their animals. Well, now there's really no excuse if you can go. I mean, shelters, you don't want to go to a shelter. That is your absolute worst case scenario. But at least you know that if you have to. Couple different things, and I'll wrap things up. There are some wonderful services here in Lee County. If you haven't already signed up for them, I use this all the time. It's called Alert Lee. And it's used anytime there's an emergency that arises. So you'll even sometimes get text messages if there's, let's say a school goes on lockdown, that kind of thing. And that way you know if there's an emergency in your vicinity. So you can sign up at alertlee.com for those particular alerts. It's free. There's also a Lee Prepares app available for iPhones and Androids. But this can't hurt. This is also how I knew Zone A was called before everyone else knew it, right? So as a TV, in TV, of course, I'm always waiting for my alerts to come in from the PR folks. Nope. In this case, I saw it on my phone. I was like, we're called. And we were able to get that information out immediately to you all or to anybody watching. So you'll know it when I know it if Zone A gets called. So it's really great. So that's called Alertly. I'm going to do the next one. Yes. Oh, and it'll also let you know too, after the fact, where there might be food, water, kind of things set up. Like the National Guard spots, remember after Ian? So that was also, I mean, granted, I didn't really have internet, but when I did get internet, I got the text alert. That's how I knew where to go. All right. So other great resources. It's called the Lee County Special Needs Program. So if you are medically dependent, you can pre-register now, and they will ensure transportation to a medically equipped shelter. Typically in every county, there are 2 medically equipped shelters. That means that you are guaranteed electricity. You are guaranteed a generator. This would be for somebody who requires electricity to survive. Oxygen, dialysis, that kind of thing. So you can register now, and you have to register before we go into a cone. But once you get on it, shelter app, .legov.com. And again, all this will be on the YouTube page too, so you can always go back and reference it. But that will, especially if you have loved ones who might need a little bit of extra help, you're like, hey, they'll make sure your loved one is taken to that shelter and taken care of. They usually pick them up a day before. And then there's also a phone number. So every county has something like this. Every single county in Southwest Florida, which I really appreciate that they're looking out for our folks who need some love. This QR code will also take you to all of my prep guides because I created one for every single county in Southwest Florida, but that's for the main page for the our hurricane page. Okay, got a lot of fun information out. I'd love to take questions if you have some time. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that was the tornado outbreak. Great question. So she was talking about how Milton was, yeah, it was a producer of record tornadoes. We've never had that many EF3s in South Florida. National Weather Service in Miami had 2 EF3s in their jurisdiction alone. And also what was creepy about a lot of those tornadoes, they were not rain wrapped. Some of them we are actually capturing on our FDOT camera crossing Alligator Alley. I don't know if you were watching. Oh, there was a big one that was like, it looked like something I used to chase in the Midwest. And I was, I was a chaser when I was in the Midwest. I was a chaser even in North Georgia. But to have that many tornadoes, that is not normal. However, tornadoes are a major part of all those outer rain bands. So we just always have to be prepared for that potential. Milton reminded us that it can happen. We've just never seen it before. Usually our tornadoes are small and cute. They're EF0s, EF1s, like the one that hit Matlacha Bridge. We went under a warning for that one because we knew it was coming up the pass. It was a cell that was right over Punta Rasa, also produced damage there. Punta Rasa then went due north, came up through Matlacha Pass, went right across the bridge. That's what we were able to capture live on TV as it crossed over. So again, though, that was a small one, right? That was an EF0, EF1, but there were some big boys, especially in the central toward Lake Okeechobee. That was, yeah. So I think we just have to be cognizant of, we will absolutely have tornadoes during hurricanes, especially if we get those outer rain bands. It is inevitable. We tend to see them in the outer rain bands as well as the inner eye wall. It's where you get your little spin ups in the eye wall, because we know with Ian we had a lot of them. It was just hard to discern what was a tornado and what was just 140-mile-per-hour winds. But yeah, I just think we always have to be ready for that. And that's why you have your emergency alert systems on your phones. I know they were going off like crazy. I always recommend too a NOAA weather radio. I know I have one at my house. So that is a direct line to the National Weather Service. And then you'll get the alert when I do. A NOAA, NOAA weather radio. And it's a little white square. And I can help you program it if you want, because you can program it to your county. That way you don't get it for the entire area. Because if you get it for the entire area, it will drive you crazy. But I set my mom's up. I set my mom's up for, she's up in Bluffton, South Carolina. So hers, Jasper County and Beaufort County, because what hits Beaufort then comes over to Jasper. So that way she knows if there's a big storm there just to her west, chances are it's going to affect her. And that way she's ready to go. You would have to look it up. It's very specific. Yeah, they're called same codes. You have to look it up, but I'll gladly help you. I could try. Yeah, no, the direction, it is so tedious. It'll probably be almost easier if you bring it up here. I'll program it for you. I'll do it. Yeah, for sure.
Second question.
Mhm.
The Gulf seems to be warming faster than the Atlantic.
Yep, Gulf's shallower.
And so are we getting more storms originating in the Gulf?
Not necessarily originating, but great question. We are seeing more undergo rapid intensification. The dreaded word, rapid intensification is 2 words. So not so fun fact. What was it? Between 1965 and 2017, we had as many as many Cat 4s and 5s as we had from 2017 to 2024 in the Gulf. That's not horrifying. So yes, the Gulf is absolutely warm, and there are a couple of different factors when it comes. What we're seeing basically, any storm that hits the Gulf is undergoing rapid intensification. Rapid intensification is when you have a storm that increases by at least 35 miles per hour in a 24-hour period. Milton went from a Cat 1 to a Cat 5 in 24 hours. Want to talk horrifying? It increased 95 miles per hour. That was the third highest rate of rapid intensification ever recorded for our basins. When I say our basins, Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf, because that's what hits us. Third highest rate of rapid intensification. So yeah, it is concerning. The storms that hit the Gulf are, unfortunately, nothing's working against them. They have very warm water. They're also, NOAA's doing some really interesting studies on how salinity affects rapid intensification. They're finding like an inverse relationship. So for example, if you have a lot of like nasty freshwater outflows, or you get these freshwater pockets, that might be contributing. So they're starting to discover how, why are we seeing, we know that warm sea surface temperatures do it, but what else could be a factor? That is the hardest thing to forecast because it is so like it's so small scale. But yeah, it is a huge concern. Absolutely. Good question. Anybody else with any fun questions? Yeah. You can get it from Amazon. It's usually, the company's called Midland. That's what all mine are. I know my son carries one around. It's a little handheld. It almost looks like a walkie-talkie, and he carries it around. He also he's weird. He likes to pretend he's a first responder, and so that's perfect. I'm like, there you go, buddy. You can also tell people the forecast. You turn it on, you're always getting that automated, the robot voice from the National Weather Service telling you the forecast. It's funny. It's also like, hey, at least he's ready. That thing will start going on. There are worse things. So yeah, no, it's great. Thank you. Any other questions, just holler. You can always email. But if you do have a NOAA Weather Radio, one of the little white boxes, and you're having issues programming it, I will be glad to help you. For sure. For sure. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming and for being aware. I appreciate it.